The Lycan king pretends to be blind to test his workers, until the new maid surprises him. Don't look directly at him. The servant's voice was sharp as we hurried through the stone corridors of the Lycan king's fortress. He can't see you anyway, but somehow he always knows when you do. I tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, but my mind was racing. And don't pity him, she continued. He'll smell it on you and you'll be gone by sunset. I wanted to ask what happened to the other maids. The ones who came before me. But my throat was too tight with fear to form words. The palace around us was beautiful in a cold, forbidding way. All massive stone archways and narrow windows that let in slices of gray light. It felt less like a home and more like a trap waiting to spring closed. We passed 2 guards at an intersection, and I heard one mutter to the other. Another one. How long do you think this one lasts? His companion snorted. She's not even pretty. At least the last few had something to recommend them. This one? Plain as porridge. She'll be crying by nightfall. Heat flooded my face, but I kept my eyes down and my pace steady. I wasn't here because I was pretty. I wasn't even here because I was particularly good at anything. I was here because my step-family wanted me gone, and sending me to serve the blind Lycan king was a convenient way to make that happen. The realization hit me like cold water. They hadn't sent me to serve. They'd sent me to be disposed of. The servant stopped so abruptly I nearly crashed into her back. We'd arrived at a massive oak door reinforced with iron. The guards flanking it exchanged looks. She's here to see His Majesty, King James Cofer, the servant announced. The king's expecting her, one guard said, but he didn't sound pleased about it. He gave me a once-over that made my skin crawl. You sure you want to do this, girl? Most don't make it through the first conversation. I don't think I have a choice, I managed to say. We all have choices, the other guard said. Yours just all happen to be bad ones. Before I could respond, they pushed the doors open and the servant shoved me forward. I stumbled into an antechamber, and the doors slammed shut behind me with terrible finality. The lock clicked. The sound echoed in the sudden silence, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The room was dimly lit, heavy curtains blocking most of the light from the windows. Rich tapestries covered the walls, depicting battles and ceremonies I didn't recognize. The air smelled of smoke and something else. Something wild and dangerous that made my wolf stir uneasily inside me. This was an alpha's territory. I could feel his power saturating every surface, pressing against my skin like a warning. Come closer, a voice commanded from the darkness. I flinched. The voice was deep, rough, edged with something I couldn't quite name. Not quite anger. Not quite pain. Something in between. My feet moved before my brain caught up, carrying me toward the source of that voice. Toward the adjoining room where firelight flickered. He was sitting by the window. King James Cofer. Even seated, I could tell he was massive, broad-shouldered and tall, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and a beard that suggested he'd stopped caring about appearances months ago. He wore dark clothing, simple but well made, and his hands rested on the arms of his chair with a stillness that felt dangerous. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Storm gray, unfocused, staring at something just past my shoulder. Those were the eyes of a blind man. Everyone knew the story. The Lycan king had lost his sight in the same attack that killed his mate and unborn child 8 months ago. Some said it was poison. Others said it was dark magic. No one knew for certain, and no one dared ask. Who are you? He demanded. I'm Nancy, Your Majesty, I whispered. Nancy Creech. My family sent me to serve you. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His jaw clenched, and I saw his hands tighten on the armrests. Serve me, he repeated, his tone making it clear what he thought of that explanation. Come closer. I took 3 hesitant steps forward. Close enough now that I could see the sharp angles of his face, the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, the way his eyes didn't quite track my movement even though his head turned toward me. I know you're afraid, he said quietly, dangerously. Everyone is. But I also know you're lying about why you're here. So tell me, Nancy Creech, who sent you to kill me? If you're loving Nancy's story and want to see where this dangerous game of truth and deception leads, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the Lycan King discovers Nancy's darkest secret. New chapters drop regularly, and this is one story you'll want to follow to the very end. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Kill him? Your Majesty, I stammered, I'm not, I would never, I don't even know how to. He stood. The movement was sudden, fluid, completely at odds with someone who was supposed to be blind and uncertain of his surroundings. But then he swayed, his hand reaching out as if searching for something to steady himself, and I acted without thinking. I closed the distance between us and gently grasped his arm, guiding him back to the chair. Careful, Your Majesty. The chair is right behind you. His muscles were rigid under my touch, coiled with tension, but he allowed me to help him sit. For a moment, we were both silent. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I'm not here to hurt you, I said, forcing the words past the fear clogging my throat. I don't know why my step-family sent me, but I know they wanted me gone. I'm sorry if that's not the answer you're looking for, but it's the only truth I have. He stared up at me with those unfocused gray eyes, and I had the strangest sensation that he could see every lie I'd ever told, every secret I'd ever kept, written across my face. Then his expression shifted, just slightly, into something I couldn't read. Your step-family, he said. Not your family. My father died 2 years ago. His new wife and her children made it very clear I wasn't welcome after that. I looked down at my hands, still trembling. I've spent the last 2 years as their servant. When they heard you needed attendance, they volunteered me. I think they hoped I wouldn't come back. The silence stretched out so long I thought he might have me dragged away and executed. But finally, he spoke. Sit. I blinked. Your Majesty? Sit, he repeated, gesturing vaguely toward a chair near the fireplace. If you're going to tell me your sad story, you might as well be comfortable. I wasn't sure if this was a test or mercy, but I wasn't about to argue. I crossed to the chair and sat, perching on the edge like I might need to flee at any moment. The king's chambers were warm, almost stifling, but I couldn't stop shivering. Tell me everything, he commanded. Your father's death. Your step-family. Why they wanted you gone. All of it. So I did. I told him about my father's sudden illness, the way he'd withered and died in a matter of weeks. How his new wife, Georgina, had barely waited until his body was cold before she started dismantling everything he'd built. How my stepbrother Thomas and stepsister Lillian had delighted in my degradation, making me scrub floors and serve them meals while they lived in luxury. I told him about the years of being invisible in my own home. How I'd been forbidden from attending social gatherings or seeing old friends. How they'd sold my mother's jewelry and my father's books, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of my old life. How they'd told everyone I was troubled, unreliable, not quite right in the head, so that when I finally tried to ask for help, no one believed me. King James listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask. When I finally ran out of words, my throat raw and my eyes stinging, he was quiet for a long moment. And now you're here, he said. Sent to serve a blind king that everyone whispers about. Sent to a palace where servants disappear and no one asks questions. Tell me, Nancy, do you think your step-family sent you here hoping I'd kill you? Or were they hoping you'd kill me? The question stole my breath. I hadn't thought about it like that. Hadn't wanted to believe Georgina and Thomas and Lillian hated me enough to orchestrate my death. But looking at it through the king's eyes, the cold calculation of it made terrible sense. I don't know, I whispered. Maybe both. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something for him. You're either very honest or very clever. I haven't decided which yet. I'm just honest, Your Majesty. I've never been clever enough to pull off anything else. His mouth twitched. It might have been the ghost of a smile. It was gone too quickly to tell. We'll see. You'll stay in the servants' quarters tonight. Tomorrow, you'll begin your duties. I require someone to assist me with daily tasks. Reading correspondence, describing my surroundings, ensuring I don't walk into walls or tumble downstairs. The way he said it, with just a hint of bitterness, made my chest ache. I'll do my best, Your Majesty. See that you do. And Nancy? His blind eyes found me with unnerving precision. If I discover you're lying to me about anything at all, I won't hesitate to have you executed. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Your Majesty. Good. Now get out. I'm tired of company. I stood quickly, curtsied even though he couldn't see it, and fled the room before he could change his mind. As the door closed behind me, I sagged against the wall, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. I'd survived the first encounter with the Lycan king. But somehow, I had the feeling that was the easiest part. The real test was just beginning. Chapter 1, The Invisible Maid. I didn't sleep that first night. The servants' quarters were cold and cramped, 6 beds crammed into a room meant for 4, and the other maids made it clear I wasn't welcome. They'd seen too many girls like me come and go. Getting attached was pointless. When dawn finally broke, I was almost grateful. At least now I could do something other than lie awake imagining all the ways I might die in this place. A sharp-faced woman named Constance collected me after breakfast. She was the head housekeeper, and from the look she gave me, thin-lipped and sour, she'd already decided I was more trouble than I was worth. The king has very specific requirements, she said as we climbed the stairs back to his chambers. You will describe everything you do before you do it. You will ask permission before moving anything. You will guide him when necessary but never grab or startle him. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am. Most girls last 3 days before they're dismissed. The last one made it 5. She paused outside his door, her hand on the latch. I suggest you pay attention to everything. The king doesn't repeat himself. She knocked once, opened the door, and practically shoved me inside before disappearing back down the hall. I stood in the antechamber, my heart pounding, wondering if I should announce myself or wait to be summoned. You're late, the king's voice called from the other room. It's been light for 20 minutes. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't know what time you expected me. Dawn, he said flatly. I expect you at dawn. Every day. No exceptions. I hurried into his private chambers and found him sitting in the same chair by the window, dressed in dark trousers and a shirt that hung unbuttoned at the collar. His hair was tied back, and without the shadows of last night, I could see him more clearly. He was younger than I'd expected. Maybe 30. And handsome, in a harsh, unforgiving way. Like something carved from stone and never softened. I'll be on time tomorrow, I promised. Your Majesty, may I approach? He waved a hand impatiently. Yes, yes. Come here. I need you to read this morning's correspondence. There was a small writing desk near the window, covered in sealed letters and rolled parchments. I picked up the first one, broke the seal, and began to read aloud. It was from one of the northern packs, a tedious report about border patrols and supply shipments. The king listened without comment, his expression giving nothing away. Next, he said when I finished. I reached for another letter, but my hand slipped and knocked over an inkwell. Black ink spilled across the desk, soaking into several documents. I gasped and grabbed for a cloth, trying desperately to blot up the mess before it spread further. I'm so sorry, I blurted, my hands shaking as I worked. I'm so clumsy, I didn't mean to. I'll clean this up right away, please don't. Stop, he commanded. I froze, the ink-stained cloth clutched in my hands. My heart was slamming against my ribs. This was it. I'd ruined his documents and now he'd have me thrown out or worse. But instead of anger, his voice was calm. Almost curious. Were you going to apologize and then lie to me about what happened? I blinked at him, confused. No, Your Majesty. I knocked over the inkwell. It was my fault. I should have been more careful. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering this. Most people would have blamed the placement of the inkwell. Or claimed I'd distracted them. Or invented some excuse to avoid responsibility. I don't know how to do that, I admitted quietly. My stepfamily always knew when I was lying. It seemed easier to just tell the truth and take whatever punishment came. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he stood, and again that fluid movement seemed at odds with blindness, but he immediately reached out as if orienting himself by touch. Guide me to the desk. I set down the cloth and carefully took his elbow, leading him the 7 steps to the desk. His arm was solid muscle under my touch, and I could feel the warmth of him even through his shirt. When we reached the desk, I started to pull away, but he spoke again. Describe the damage. 3 letters are partially soaked, Your Majesty. The one from the northern pack is mostly illegible. The other 2 might be salvageable if we let them dry. The desk itself is stained but undamaged. Can you rewrite the northern pack's report from what you read? I think so, Your Majesty. I have a good memory for words. Then do that. He turned slightly, his unfocused eyes aimed somewhere past my shoulder. And Nancy? Thank you for telling me the truth. You'd be surprised how rare honesty is in this palace. The words hit me harder than I expected. Something loosened in my chest, some knot of tension I'd been carrying since I arrived. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It wasn't even kindness. But it was acknowledgement. Recognition that I'd done something right instead of something wrong. For a girl who'd spent 2 years being told she did everything wrong, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. I'll get fresh parchment, I said softly. The rest of that first day was a blur of tasks, each one accompanied by careful narration. I'm walking to the bookshelf now, Your Majesty. I'm reaching for the 3rd book from the left. I'm opening the curtains to let in more light. Would you like me to describe the view? He tolerated my constant commentary with surprising patience, though I could tell it grated on him sometimes. The way his jaw would tighten when I over-explained something simple, or the almost imperceptible sigh when I asked permission for the 5th time in as many minutes. But he never snapped at me. Never raised his voice. And when I accidentally bumped into a side table, sending a vase teetering, he actually reached out and steadied it before I could. His hand moved with perfect precision, catching the vase before it fell. I stared at his hand, then at his face. His eyes were unfocused, aimed at nothing. But he'd known exactly where that vase was. Exactly how far to reach. Thank you, Your Majesty, I said carefully, watching his expression. His face was a mask. Be more careful. That vase belonged to my mother. I will, Your Majesty. He withdrew his hand and settled back in his chair, and the moment passed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed something impossible. Something he hadn't meant for me to see. By the time Constance arrived to dismiss me for the evening, I was exhausted. My feet ached, my voice was hoarse from reading aloud for hours, and my mind was spinning with questions I didn't dare ask. Well? Constance demanded as we walked back to the servants' quarters. Are you dismissed? No, ma'am. He asked me to return tomorrow at dawn. She looked genuinely surprised. Perhaps you're less useless than you appear. It wasn't a compliment, but coming from her, it might as well have been. I made it through day 1. That was more than most could say. That night, lying in my narrow bed while the other maids snored around me. I replayed that moment with the vase over and over. The perfect precision of his reach. The way he'd known exactly where it was without seeing it. It could have been luck. Muscle memory. Familiarity with his own chambers. But something in my gut told me it was none of those things. I fell asleep wondering if the Lycan King's blindness was real, or if I'd just stumbled onto a secret that could get me killed. The next morning, I arrived at dawn exactly. The king was already awake, standing by the window with his back to me. For just a moment, before he heard me enter, I could have sworn his eyes were focused on something outside. Really focused. Tracking movement in the courtyard below. Then he turned, and his eyes were unfocused again, that strange unseeing gaze that looked through me rather than at me. "You're on time," he observed. Good. Over the next few days, I began to notice patterns. Little things that didn't quite add up. The way he never stumbled over furniture even though the servants constantly moved things around. The way he could tell when I was nervous or uncomfortable without me saying a word. The way books appeared on his desk, their pages marked and clearly read, even though he supposedly couldn't see. I told myself I was imagining things. That my suspicious stepfamily had trained me to see deception everywhere. But the doubts kept gnawing at me, growing stronger with each passing day. On the fourth day, the king asked me to take him walking in the gardens. "It's been too long since I felt sunlight," he said. "Guide me." I offered my arm, and he took it with the careful deliberation of someone who genuinely needed the support. We walked slowly through the palace corridors, me describing everything we passed. "We're approaching the main staircase now, Your Majesty. 15 steps down. There's a guard at the bottom who just saluted you, though you can't see it." "Tell me about the weather," he said as we descended. "It's overcast, Your Majesty. Gray clouds, but no rain yet. The wind is cold. Autumn is definitely here." "I used to love autumn," he said quietly. Lorelei did too. We were married in autumn. It was the first time he'd mentioned her name to me. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "She must have been very special, Your Majesty. She was everything." His voice had gone flat, empty. "And they took her from me. Took our son. Destroyed everything I had in one night. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring them back." His grip on my arm tightened slightly, then released. "Nothing brings them back." We walked in silence after that, through corridors and down more stairs, until we finally emerged into the palace gardens. They were beautiful in a melancholy way, all turning leaves and late-blooming flowers that would die with the first frost. I guided him along gravel paths, describing the colors and the layout, the fountain at the center and the maze of hedges to the east. We'd been walking for perhaps 20 minutes when I saw her. A woman in a dark green dress, standing by the fountain. She was tall and elegant, with the same dark hair as the king and the same storm-gray eyes. When she saw us, she approached with quick, purposeful strides. "James," she said, her voice sharp with concern. "What are you doing out here?" "Walking, Vivian." The king's tone was dry. "It's allowed, last I checked." So this was his sister. The Princess Vivian. I'd heard the servants mention her but hadn't met her yet. "And who is this?" Vivian asked, her eyes raking over me with obvious suspicion. "My new attendant. Nancy Creech." Vivian's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. Disbelief maybe. Or concern. "James, might I have a word? Privately?" "Nancy, wait here," the king commanded. "My sister and I need to speak." I released his arm and stepped back, watching as Vivian led him several paces away. They spoke in low, urgent voices that I couldn't quite hear, but I could see Vivian's agitation in her gestures, the way she kept glancing back at me. The king's face remained impassive, giving nothing away. Finally, Vivian threw up her hands and stalked away, but not before shooting me a look that promised this conversation wasn't over. The king stood alone for a moment, his face turned toward the fountain, before calling out to me. "Nancy. Take me back inside." I hurried over and offered my arm again. We walked in silence until we were back in his chambers, the door firmly closed behind us. Then he turned to me, and for just a second, I could have sworn his eyes focused directly on my face before sliding away again. "My sister thinks you're a spy," he said conversationally. "Sent by my enemies to finish what they started." My blood ran cold. "Your Majesty, I'm not." "I know. If you were, you'd be far more competent at it." His mouth quirked in something that might have been amusement. "But she's not entirely wrong to be suspicious. Everyone who serves me is suspect. Everyone who gets close is a potential threat. It's exhausting, really. Never knowing who to trust." "I don't know what to say to that, Your Majesty." "There's nothing to say. It's simply the reality of my life now." He moved toward his chair with that uncanny precision, settling into it without fumbling. "You're dismissed for the day. Return at dawn tomorrow." "Yes, Your Majesty." As I turned to leave, he spoke again. "Nancy? Don't take my sister's suspicion personally. She's just trying to protect me. After what happened to Lorelei, she doesn't trust anyone." "I understand, Your Majesty." I left quickly, my mind reeling. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Everyone who gets close is a potential threat. It explained so much. The constant testing. The careful distance. The way he watched me, even though he supposedly couldn't see. And that's when it hit me. The truth I'd been dancing around for days. King James Cofer wasn't blind. He'd never been blind. This was all an act. An elaborate deception designed to expose his enemies by making them think he was vulnerable. And I'd just walked right into the middle of it. Chapter 2, The King Who Sees. I should have confronted him. Or maybe I should have run. But I did neither. Instead, I lay awake that entire night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd truly seen what I thought I'd seen. Wondering if acknowledging the truth out loud would get me killed. Because if the king was pretending to be blind, he had a reason. A dangerous reason. And anyone who discovered his secret too soon would become a liability he couldn't afford. So when dawn came and I returned to his chambers, I made a decision. I would act as though nothing had changed. I would continue narrating my movements, guiding him carefully, treating him like the blind king everyone believed him to be. And I would watch. Learn. Try to understand what game he was playing before I accidentally became a pawn in it. "Good morning, Your Majesty," I said as I entered. "The sun is just rising. It's going to be a clear day." He was sitting at his desk, his hands resting on what appeared to be a letter. "Good morning, Nancy. Come read this. It arrived last night." I crossed to the desk and picked up the letter. It was from one of the southern territories, reporting unusual activity near the borders. Possible rogue wolves gathering in numbers. The writer was concerned about raids. I read it aloud, keeping my voice steady and professional. When I finished, the king was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "Your Majesty?" "About the letter." "What's your opinion?" "I'm not sure my opinion matters, Your Majesty." "Humor me." I looked down at the letter again, choosing my words carefully. "I think whoever wrote this is genuinely worried. The language is urgent but not panicked. They're not exaggerating to get attention. They actually believe there's a threat." "Interesting." His fingers drummed once on the desk. "And why would rogue wolves gather in organized numbers?" "Because someone is organizing them," I said slowly. "Someone with resources and a goal." His expression didn't change, but I felt the temperature in the room shift. "Exactly. Which means this isn't random violence. It's coordinated. Part of something larger. Do you think it's connected to? I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. To my mate's murder? Yes. Everything is connected to that now. His voice had gone hard. Every threat, every suspicious incident, every unexplained gathering of rogues. They're all threads leading back to the same conspiracy. I just have to find the right one to pull. I set the letter down carefully. What would you like me to do, Your Majesty? Write a response. Tell them to increase patrols but don't engage unless attacked. I want to know numbers, movements, anything unusual. And Nancy? Don't mention this conversation to anyone. I won't, Your Majesty. Over the following days, I fell into a rhythm. I arrived at dawn, read correspondence, guided the king through his daily tasks, and kept my observations to myself. I watched as he accidentally knocked things over to test if I'd catch them. Watched as he asked me to describe paintings I suspected he could see perfectly well. Watched as he navigated his chambers with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where everything was. And I said nothing. But I started testing him too. Small things. Subtle shifts. I'd move a book slightly to the left and see if he reached for it in the new location or the old one. I'd describe the weather inaccurately and watch to see if he corrected me. I'd forget to announce my movements and observe whether he tracked me anyway. The results were damning. He adjusted to changes immediately. He never corrected false descriptions. He never looked directly at me when I moved silently. The king wasn't blind. But he was very, very good at pretending. On my 8th day of service, Princess Vivian cornered me in the hallway outside the king's chambers. Walk with me, she said. It wasn't a request. We walked in tense silence until we reached a small courtyard garden, deserted at this hour. Vivian turned to face me, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. You've lasted longer than the others, she said. Why? I don't know, Your Highness. Maybe I'm just better at following instructions. Or maybe you're better at hiding your true purpose. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. What do you want from my brother, Nancy Creech? Nothing, Your Highness. Just to serve him as I was sent to do. Everyone wants something. Power, influence, proximity to the throne. What's your angle? I don't have an angle. I barely had a life before I came here. This is the first place I've felt like I might actually be useful instead of just existing. Something in my voice must have convinced her, because her posture softened slightly. You really don't have any ambitions, do you? No schemes, no plans? No, Your Highness. I just want to survive. Maybe earn enough trust that I don't have to be afraid all the time. Vivian studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she sighed. My brother hasn't let anyone close since Lorelei died. You've lasted 2 weeks. That makes you either very innocent or very dangerous. I'm just innocent, Your Highness. Probably too innocent for a place like this. For both your sakes, I hope that's true. Because if I discover you're here to hurt him, I'll kill you myself. No trial. No mercy. Understood? Understood, Your Highness. She turned to leave, then paused. Nancy? Has he told you what happened? The night Lorelei died? No, Your Highness. Vivian's face twisted with old pain. They were celebrating. Lorelei was pregnant with their first child, and they'd just announced it to the inner circle. 20 people they trusted absolutely. Friends, advisors, family. Someone brought poisoned wine to toast the new heir. My hand flew to my mouth. Oh gods. Lorelei drank first. She was dead in minutes, and the baby with her. James tried every healer, every spell, everything. But there was nothing to be done. She died in his arms. Vivian's voice had gone flat, distant. And the poison did something to him too. Not enough to kill him, but enough to damage him. Or so everyone believes. Her emphasis on those last words made my stomach drop. So everyone believes. Vivian met my eyes with sudden intensity. My brother hasn't been the same since that night. He trusts no one. Believes everyone is part of the conspiracy. He sees threats everywhere, real or imagined. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes I worry the poison damaged more than just his eyes. Sometimes I worry it damaged his mind. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone in the courtyard with a truth I wished I didn't have. The king wasn't just pretending to be blind to catch conspirators. He was pretending because he actually had been poisoned. Because he'd lost everything in one night and decided the only way to survive was to make everyone think he was weaker than he was. It was brilliant. It was heartbreaking. And I was caught right in the middle of it. When I returned to his chambers, the king was standing by the window again. For just a moment, I saw his shoulders slump, saw the exhaustion in every line of his body. Then he straightened, and the mask was back in place. "You're late," he said without turning. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Your sister wanted to speak with me." "Did she threaten to kill you if you hurt me?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good. That means she likes you. When she doesn't bother with threats, that's when you should worry." He turned, his unfocused eyes aimed somewhere past my shoulder. "Did she tell you about Lorelei?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "I'm sorry for your loss." "Everyone's sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything." He moved toward his desk, and this time I saw it clearly. The slight hesitation before each step, as if he was counting paces. The way his hand reached out just a fraction too early to touch the desk's edge. He was performing his blindness for me. And now that I knew the truth, I couldn't unsee it. "Your Majesty," I said carefully, "may I ask you something?" "You may ask." "I may not answer." "Why do you trust me?" The question hung in the air between us. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't respond. Then he sighed. "I don't trust you, Nancy. I don't trust anyone. But you're either the worst spy I've ever encountered, or you're exactly what you claim to be. A girl with no agenda beyond survival. And in a palace full of people who want something from me, that makes you remarkably safe." "Safe," I repeated. "That's not the same as trusted." "No. It's not. But it's the best I can offer." He sat down heavily in his chair. "Now read me the rest of that correspondence. We've wasted enough time on philosophy." I spent the rest of that day reading letters and reports, my mind only half on the words. I kept thinking about what Vivian had said. Everyone wants something. But what did I want? What did any of this matter when I was just trying to survive one day at a time? That night, I was walking back to the servants' quarters when I passed a nervous young man carrying a silver tray. Wine glasses clinked as he hurried past, his hands trembling so badly I was surprised he didn't drop the whole thing. I almost kept walking. Almost. But something made me pause and look back at him. He was heading toward the king's chambers, and his fear was palpable even from a distance. Not the usual nervousness of serving royalty. Something deeper. More desperate. Before I could think better of it, I followed him. Stayed far enough back that he wouldn't notice, but close enough to see where he went. He stopped outside the king's chambers, composed himself, and knocked. The door opened. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw him enter with the tray. And then I saw him leave 5 minutes later, moving much faster, looking over his shoulder. When I finally made it back to the servants' quarters, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about that trembling man and the wine he'd delivered. About poisoned toasts and murdered mates. About the fact that if someone wanted to kill the king now, they'd try the same method that had worked before. I was being paranoid. I had to be. But the fear gnawed at me all night, and when dawn came, I practically ran to the king's chambers. He was alive. Sitting at his desk, looking tired but unharmed. Relief flooded through me so strongly my knees almost buckled. "You're early," he observed. And out of breath. "What's wrong?" I almost told him about the servant with the wine. Almost confessed my suspicions. But what if I was wrong? What if I was seeing threats where none existed, just like Vivian had said he did? "Nothing, Your Majesty. I just didn't want to be late again." Liar. His voice was soft but certain. "What happened, Nancy?" I hesitated, then told him. About the nervous servant, the wine, my irrational fear. "It sounds foolish when I say it aloud," I finished. "I'm sorry for worrying over nothing." The king was very still. "Did you see which direction he went after leaving my chambers?" "South, I think." "Toward the servants' wing." The king stood abruptly, moved to his door, and called for guards. "Find the man who delivered wine to my chambers last night. Bring him to me immediately." The guards left at a run. The king returned to his chair, and I could see his hands gripping the armrests tight enough to make the wood creak. "Your Majesty?" I whispered. "That wine was poisoned, Nancy." I could smell it the moment he brought it in. I had him pour it out and watched him the entire time to make sure he didn't drink it himself. Then I let him go, assuming he was simply a pawn. A message from my enemies. A reminder that they can still reach me. Then why send guards after him now? Because someone who delivers poison and survives usually doesn't survive for long. They're a liability to whoever sent them. His jaw clenched. If they haven't killed him yet, I need to find him before they do. He might be able to tell me who's behind this. We waited in tense silence. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, the guards returned. Empty-handed. "He's gone, Your Majesty," the lead guard reported. His room was cleared out. No one has seen him since early this morning. "Find him," the king commanded. "Search every inch of this palace and the surrounding territory. I want him alive." The guards left again. I stood frozen, unsure what to do or say. The king's hands were still gripping his chair, his knuckles white. "You saved my life last night," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything, Your Majesty. You noticed. You paid attention when everyone else walks through these halls blind to what's happening around them. That's more than nothing." He turned his face toward me, and for just a heartbeat, his eyes focused. Really focused, looking directly at me with perfect clarity. Then the moment passed, and they were unfocused again. "Thank you, Nancy." My throat was too tight to speak. I just nodded, even though he supposedly couldn't see it. Vivian appeared at the door an hour later, looking grim. "James, we need to talk. Privately." "Nancy stays," the king said. "She's the one who spotted the threat. She deserves to know what's happening." Vivian looked like she wanted to argue, but ultimately nodded. "Fine. But you're not going to like this. We found the servant's body in the river. Throat cut. He'd been dead for hours, probably since shortly after he left your chambers. So they cleaned up their loose end," the king said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Any idea who he was working for?" "Not yet. But James, there's something else." Vivian glanced at me, then continued. "The wine wasn't meant to kill you. It was too weak for that. The poison was designed to incapacitate. Make you vulnerable." The room went very cold. "So this wasn't an assassination attempt," the king said slowly. "It was preparation for one. They were trying to weaken me before making their real move." "That's what we think." Vivian's face was drawn. "Which means they're planning something soon. Something big." The king stood and moved to the window, his posture rigid with controlled fury. Then we need to move first. Accelerate the timeline. Force them into the open before they're ready. James, that's dangerous. Everything is dangerous. At least this way I control when and where the confrontation happens. He turned back toward us. Vivian, increase security but make it look like routine. I don't want to spook them into hiding. And Nancy, you're to stay in my chambers from now on. I'll have a bed brought in. I'm grateful for the opportunity, but before I could truly voice my thanks, there was a gentle knock at the door. Vivian opened it to reveal a young woman in a servant's dress, carrying folded linens. She didn't meet anyone's eyes as she curtsied. Begging your pardon, Your Majesty, she said softly. The head housekeeper sent me to change the bedding in your antechamber. The king nodded his permission, and the woman scurried into the adjoining room. Vivian and the king continued their discussion in low voices, mapping out security measures and potential threats. I stood to the side, trying to process everything I'd learned in the past hour. My entire life had changed in a heartbeat. I was no longer just a disposable maid sent by a cruel stepfamily. I was now living in the king's chambers, trusted with information that could get me killed, caught in the middle of a conspiracy that had already claimed countless lives. And somehow, impossibly, I didn't want to run. For the first time since my father died, I felt like I mattered. Like my presence made a difference. The king valued my observations. Trusted my instincts. In this dangerous, paranoid world, that was worth more than all the safety I'd never had anyway. The servant finished with the bedding and curtsied again on her way out. Vivian left shortly after, promising to return with more information by evening. And then it was just me and the king, standing in chambers that had suddenly become both my sanctuary and my prison. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, the king said into the silence. I won't force you to put yourself in danger for my sake. Where else would I go, Your Majesty? Back to my stepfamily? Back to being invisible and worthless? I shook my head. At least here, I'm useful. At least here, someone notices if I'm alive or dead. His expression softened just slightly. You're not worthless, Nancy. Don't let anyone make you believe that. It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had said to me in 2 years. I had to look away before the tears that suddenly burned in my eyes could fall. Thank you, Your Majesty, I whispered. We spent the rest of that day in careful routine, but everything had shifted. We both knew the performance was no longer quite as necessary. He caught himself looking directly at me twice, and I caught myself not pretending to be surprised when he moved with perfect precision through the room. We were dancing around the truth now, both aware of the other's awareness, neither willing to speak it aloud. Because once it was said out loud, everything would change. The fragile trust between us would have to be renegotiated. And neither of us was ready for that. Not yet. That night, as I settled into the small bed that had been brought into the antechamber, I heard him moving restlessly in the next room. Pacing. I'd learned over the past weeks that he paced when he was worried or couldn't sleep, his footsteps a steady rhythm against the floor. Your Majesty? I called out softly. Are you all right? The pacing stopped. I'm fine, Nancy. Go to sleep. But he wasn't fine. I could hear it in his voice, that edge of desperation he tried so hard to hide. Before I could think better of it, I climbed out of bed, wrapped a shawl around my nightgown, and went to the doorway of his chambers. He was standing by the window, silhouetted against the moonlight, his hands braced on the sill. He didn't turn when I entered, but his voice was rough when he spoke. I told you to sleep. I know. But you're not sleeping either. I took a cautious step forward. Do you want to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about. Your Majesty, with respect, that's not true. Someone tried to poison you again. Your enemies are moving against you. You're facing a confrontation you might not survive. That seems like a lot to talk about. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, "I'm tired, Nancy. So tired of this. Of suspecting everyone. Of testing every interaction for hidden threats. Of waking up every morning and remembering that Lorelei is gone and our son never got to be born. I'm tired of being the monster everyone thinks I am just to stay alive." My heart broke for him. "You're not a monster, Your Majesty. Aren't I?" He turned then, and in the moonlight, his eyes were focused and devastatingly sad. "I let that servant die last night. Let him walk out of here knowing he'd be killed for failing. I could have protected him, but I wanted to see where he'd lead my guards. Wanted to see who would clean up the loose end. That's not the action of a good man, Nancy. That's the action of someone who's become exactly what his enemies wanted. Hard. Ruthless. Alone." I crossed the rest of the distance between us before I could second-guess myself. Stood close enough that I could see every line of exhaustion on his face, every shadow under his eyes. "You're not alone," I said firmly. "And you're not a monster. You're a man who lost everything and is doing whatever it takes to survive. To protect your kingdom. To find justice for the people you loved. That doesn't make you evil. It makes you human." He stared at me, really stared, his eyes focused and clear and full of so much pain I could barely stand it. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked. "Everyone else is. Because I know what it's like to be alone, Your Majesty. To feel like you have to be someone you're not just to survive. I see you pretending to be blind, pretending to be weaker than you are, and I understand why. Just like you understand why I pretend to be invisible and worthless even though I know I'm not. We're both wearing masks. The difference is, you chose yours to catch your enemies. I chose mine because I forgot I was allowed to take it off." His hand rose slowly, carefully, and cupped my cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, like I might shatter if he pressed too hard. "Nancy," he breathed. "What are you doing to me?" "I'm seeing you," I whispered back. "Really seeing you. Not the king. Not the blind man. Not the monster everyone whispers about. Just you. James. The man who loved his mate so much that losing her nearly destroyed him. The man who's willing to do terrible things to protect the people he has left. The man who's so tired but won't let himself rest because rest means vulnerability, and vulnerability means death." His eyes closed, and for just a moment, he leaned into my touch as I raised my own hand to cover his. "I don't know if I can trust you," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But gods, Nancy, I want to. I want to believe you're exactly what you seem to be. That you're here because fate decided to throw me one mercy in this nightmare. Then trust me, Your Majesty. I won't betray you. I can't promise I'll be strong enough or smart enough to help you win whatever battle is coming. But I can promise I'll never be the one who hurts you." He opened his eyes again, and they were wet with unshed tears. "If you're lying to me, if this is all an act, it will destroy me. You understand that? It will be the final blow I can't recover from." "I understand. And I'm not lying." We stood like that for a long moment, two broken people finding unexpected solace in each other's honesty. Then, slowly, carefully, he pulled me into his arms. Held me against his chest like I was something precious. Something worth protecting. I wrapped my arms around him and held on just as tightly, feeling his heartbeat against my cheek, the rise and fall of his breathing, the solid reality of him. "For tonight, let's not be the blind king and the invisible maid," he murmured into my hair. "Let's just be two people who understand what it means to survive." "All right," I agreed. "Just for tonight." We stayed like that until the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows. And when we finally pulled apart, something fundamental had shifted between us. A line had been crossed. A truth had been acknowledged without words. The game was still being played. The conspiracy was still moving against us. Danger still lurked in every shadow. But for the first time since I'd arrived at this palace, I didn't feel alone. And judging by the expression on the king's face, neither did he. Whatever came next, we would face it together. That was more than either of us had dared hope for. And it would have to be enough. I'm amazed by how invested you all are in Nancy and James's story. If you haven't already, now is the perfect time to subscribe. We're building something special here, a community that shows up for deep, emotional storytelling. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me what you think is going to happen next, and let's keep this journey going together. New chapters coming soon. Chapter 3, The Wine That Wasn't Meant for Her. The next morning, everything felt different. The king still pretended to be blind, and I still narrated my movements through his chambers. But there was a new undercurrent to our interactions. A warmth that hadn't existed before. Understanding. When I guided him to his chair, his hand lingered on my arm a moment longer than necessary. When I read correspondence aloud, I caught him watching me, his eyes focused and warm before he remembered to look away. We were still performing for the guards and servants who came and went, but in the spaces between, we were just Nancy and James. Two people who'd found an unexpected connection in the midst of chaos. But the rest of the world hadn't stopped turning. If anything, the threat was growing more urgent with each passing day. Vivian returned that afternoon with news. We've identified 3 more palace workers with connections to known enemies of the crown, she reported. They've all been placed under surveillance. And James, there's a feast tonight. The Lunar Council representatives are arriving. You're expected to attend. The king's jaw tightened. Perfect timing. When better to strike than when I'm surrounded by nobles and diplomats? That's why I want to cancel, Vivian said. It's too dangerous. No. We proceed as planned. If we cancel, we show weakness. Fear. That's exactly what they want. He turned toward me, his eyes deliberately unfocused. Nancy will accompany me. She'll serve as my personal attendant during the feast. My stomach dropped. Your Majesty, I'm not sure I'm qualified. You notice things others miss, he interrupted. That makes you more qualified than most. You'll stay close, describe what's happening around me, and watch for anything unusual. Vivian looked unhappy but didn't argue. I'll have guards positioned throughout the hall. But James, if anything seems wrong. I'll handle it, he said firmly. We're not running anymore, Vivian. We're ending this. After she left, I paced the chambers nervously, my mind spinning with all the ways this could go wrong. The king watched me from his chair, not even pretending to look away. You're afraid, he observed. Of course I'm afraid. Someone wants you dead, and you're walking into a room full of potential assassins. Shouldn't I be afraid? I need you calm, Nancy. Fear makes people careless. I need you sharp and observant. I stopped pacing and faced him. Then help me understand. What exactly am I looking for? Anything that breaks pattern. Servants who seem nervous. Guards who are watching me too closely. Food or drink that arrives from unexpected sources. Anyone who shouldn't be there. He stood and crossed to me with that perfect, controlled grace that still took my breath away. Trust your instincts. They've been right so far. And if I see something? What do I do? Tell me immediately. Quietly. Don't make a scene. Let whoever it is think they've gone unnoticed. His hands came up to rest on my shoulders, solid and reassuring. I'll be watching too, Nancy. You won't be alone in this. That helped. A little. Enough that I could breathe normally again. All right. I'll do my best. That's all I ask. As evening approached, servants arrived with clothing for me. A dress in deep blue, far finer than anything I'd worn in years. It fit perfectly, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. I looked like someone who belonged in a palace. Someone with purpose and dignity. The king emerged from his chambers dressed in formal black, his hair pulled back, looking every inch the powerful ruler he was. When his eyes found me, they focused for just a heartbeat before he caught himself. "You look beautiful," he said softly, then louder for the servant's benefit, "describe your appearance so I can picture you." "The dress is dark blue, Your Majesty. Long sleeves and a modest neckline. My hair is pinned up. I'm wearing the silver pendant you provided." "Good. Stay close to me tonight. I'll need you to guide me through the crowd." "Yes, Your Majesty." The great hall was magnificent. Enormous chandeliers cast golden light across polished marble floors. Long tables groaned under the weight of elaborate dishes. Nobles and diplomats filled the space, their conversations a low hum punctuated by occasional laughter. And everywhere, guards stood at attention, their eyes scanning the crowd. The king's entrance silenced the room. Every head turned as I guided him down the main aisle toward the high table where Vivian and other high-ranking nobles waited. I kept my voice low, describing the layout, the people we passed, anything that might be relevant. "There's a cluster of nobles to your left, Your Majesty. The northern delegation. They're bowing as we pass. Ahead, the high table is set with 7 chairs. Your sister is already seated at the center position, speaking with Lord Blackwood." The king nodded, allowing me to guide him to his seat at the head of the table. Once he was settled, I took my place standing just behind and to his right, as we'd practiced. From here, I had a clear view of most of the hall. The feast began with speeches and toasts. I watched the crowd while describing the proceedings to the king in a low murmur. Everything seemed normal. Nobles ate and drank. Servants moved smoothly through the crowd, delivering dishes and clearing plates. Guards maintained their positions without incident. But something felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my wolf was restless, sensing danger even when my human eyes couldn't spot it. Then I saw him. A servant carrying a tray of wine glasses, weaving through the crowd toward the high table. He was young, maybe 20, with sandy hair and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so pale and drawn. His hands trembled slightly, making the glasses clink together. My breath caught. I leaned down close to the king's ear. "Your Majesty, there's a servant approaching with wine. He's nervous. Very nervous." The king's posture didn't change, but I felt him tense. "Describe him." "Young, sandy hair, thin build. He's wearing the palace livery, but it doesn't fit quite right. Too loose in the shoulders. And he keeps looking around like he's afraid of being caught." "Which direction is he approaching from?" "Southeast. Maybe 20 paces away now. When he reaches us, you're going to stumble. Spill the entire tray. Make it look accidental." His voice was barely audible, calm and controlled. "Can you do that?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "Yes, Your Majesty." I straightened and pretended to scan the room casually while tracking the servant's progress. 15 paces. 10. 5. He was heading straight for the king, his trembling hands somehow managing to keep the glasses balanced. He reached our position and began to set glasses on the table. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice shaking. "Wine from the southern vineyards. A gift from Lord Ashford." I stepped forward as if to help, deliberately positioned myself between the servant and the king, and then acted. I caught my foot on the table leg and lunged forward with a gasp. My hands hit the tray, sending it flying. Wine and shattered glass exploded across the marble floor in a spectacular crash that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. "Oh gods," I cried, dropping to my knees as if to clean up the mess. "I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy, I didn't mean." "Seize that man." The king's voice rang out, commanding and furious. "Guards, detain him immediately." The servant's face went white. He turned to run, but guards were already moving, surrounding him before he'd taken 3 steps. He struggled briefly, then went limp as they dragged him away. The entire hall erupted in shocked murmurs. The king stood, his blind eyes surveying the room with uncanny precision even as he kept them slightly unfocused. "Someone just attempted to poison me," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "In my own palace. During a feast meant to honor our allies. This is unacceptable." Vivian was on her feet, her face pale but composed. "Guards, clear the hall. Everyone not part of the immediate household is to return to their quarters. Now." Chaos erupted as nobles and diplomats scrambled to obey. I stayed on my knees amid the broken glass and spilled wine, my hands shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. Strong hands gripped my arms, lifting me to my feet. "The king. Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes focused directly on mine before he caught himself and looked away. "No, your majesty. Just shaken." "You did well." His hands squeezed my arms gently before releasing me. "Come. We're leaving." He allowed me to guide him out of the hall, Vivian, and a contingent of guards surrounding us. The walk back to his chambers felt endless, every shadow a potential threat, every sound making me jump. By the time we reached the safety of his rooms, I was trembling so badly I could barely stand. The king locked the door behind us, then turned and pulled me into his arms without a word. I collapsed against him, finally letting the fear and adrenaline drain out in shuddering breaths. "You saved my life again," he murmured into my hair. "That's twice now, Nancy Creech. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd done nothing." We stayed like that until my breathing steadied. Then he pulled back just enough to look at me, and this time he didn't bother hiding the perfect focus of his gaze. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Really talk. No more pretending." I nodded, knowing this moment had been coming. "About your eyes?" "About everything." He led me to the chairs by the fireplace and sat, gesturing for me to take the seat across from him. "When did you know?" "The 4th day," I admitted. "I saw you standing at the window, reading a letter. Your eyes were focused. After that, I started noticing other things. The way you never stumbled. The way you caught that vase before it fell. The way you tracked movement even when you pretended not to. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? I didn't know why you were pretending. Didn't know if acknowledging it would get me killed. So I waited. Watched. Tried to understand." He studied me for a long moment. "Most people would have exposed me immediately. Used the information as leverage or sold it to my enemies. I'm not most people, Your Majesty. And I don't have enemies wealthy enough to buy information from me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, you're not most people. That's becoming increasingly clear." He leaned back in his chair. "The poison that killed Lorelei did damage my eyes. 4 weeks after she died, I could barely see. Everything was blurred, unfocused. The healers said it might be permanent. But it wasn't. No. Gradually, my vision returned. But by then, I'd realized something. When people thought I was blind, they acted differently around me. Said things they'd never say to my face. Let their guard down. Made mistakes. So I kept pretending. And I started uncovering the conspiracy that had killed my mate. And now? Now I'm close. So close to identifying everyone involved. But they know it. They're getting desperate, making increasingly bold moves. Like tonight. He met my eyes directly. Nancy, I need you to understand something. This is going to get worse before it gets better. More dangerous. And you're right in the middle of it now. If you want to leave, I'll protect you. Get you somewhere safe, far from here. I don't want to leave. Even knowing you might die? Even knowing that. I leaned forward, my hands clasped in my lap. Your Majesty, for 2 years, I've been invisible. Worthless. Existing but not really living. Here, with you, I matter. What I notice makes a difference. Who I am is enough. I'd rather die fighting for something real than spend another day being nothing. Something shifted in his expression. Raw emotion broke through his controlled facade. Gods, Nancy. How do you do that? Make me feel things I thought died with Lorelei? I'm not trying to replace her, I said quickly. I could never. I know. That's not what this is. He stood and crossed to the window, his back to me. Lorelei was my mate. My fated bond. When she died, that bond didn't break. It just went silent. Empty. I didn't think I'd ever feel connected to anyone again. He turned to face me. But then you stumbled into my life with your honesty and your terrible stepfamily and your inability to pretend to be anything you're not. And somehow, impossibly, you made me want to trust again. My throat was tight with emotion. What are you saying? I'm saying you matter to me, Nancy. Not as a tool or a servant or even as someone who saved my life twice. As a person. As someone I'm beginning to care about in ways that terrify me. He crossed back to me, kneeling so we were eye level. I'm saying that if something happened to you because of my choices, because I kept you here in danger, I'm not sure I could survive it. Then we protect each other, I said, reaching out to take his hands. You watch my back, I'll watch yours. We survive together or not at all. He stared at our joined hands, then lifted them to press a kiss to my knuckles. You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm really not. I'm just someone who refuses to be invisible anymore. That makes you extraordinary. He pulled me to my feet and into his arms again, and this time when he held me, it felt different. Not desperate or seeking comfort, but protective. Claiming. You're mine to protect now, Nancy Creech. I won't let anyone hurt you. And you're mine to stand beside, I replied. I won't let you face this alone. We stood like that until a sharp knock at the door made us both tense. The king released me and stepped back, his eyes unfocusing as he slipped back into his blind king persona. Come in. Vivian entered, her expression grim. We interrogated the servant. You're not going to like this. Tell me. He was hired by someone in your inner circle. Someone he'd never met, only received written instructions from. The wine was poisoned with the same compound that killed Lorelei, but in a much smaller dose. She paused, choosing her words carefully. James, it wasn't meant to kill you. It was meant to incapacitate you. Make you vulnerable. The king's hands clenched into fists. So they could finish the job in private. That's our assessment. Vivian's gaze flicked to me, then back to her brother. There's more. We found evidence in his room. Letters. Payment receipts. And a list of names. People who are supposedly part of the conspiracy. The king went very still. Who? Vivian pulled out a folded parchment and handed it to him. He took it, and I watched as his eyes focused to read it. His face went white, then red with fury. These are people I trust, he said, his voice deadly quiet. People who've served this kingdom for years. Lord Ashford. Captain Brennan. Even. Vivian nodded grimly. Even Lady Catherine. Your own godmother. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. I could see it in the way his shoulders hunched, in the devastated expression that broke through his controlled facade. These people held Lorelei at her naming ceremony. Toasted my coronation. Advised me through crises. They were family. I'm sorry, James. Vivian's voice was thick with emotion. But we have the evidence. Documents in their own handwriting. Financial records proving they've been embezzling from the crown for years. This conspiracy goes back further than Lorelei's death. They've been planning this for a long time. Why? The word was barely a whisper. What did I do to deserve this level of betrayal? It's not about you. It's about power and greed. They wanted control of the kingdom, and you were in the way. Lorelei's pregnancy made you stronger, more secure. So they eliminated the threat. The room fell into heavy silence. I wanted to go to him, offer comfort, but I didn't know if he'd welcome it in front of his sister. Then he looked up, and his eyes found mine with laser focus. "Nancy," he said, his voice rough. "Come here." I crossed to him immediately. He reached out and took my hand, holding it like a lifeline. "My brother seems to have grown attached to you," Vivian observed, a hint of warmth breaking through her professional demeanor. "That's good. He needs people he can trust. She's the only person in this entire palace I'm certain isn't trying to kill me," the king said bluntly. "That makes her more valuable than gold." High praise indeed. Vivian moved toward the door. "I'll increase security and begin quietly arresting the conspirators on that list. We'll do it simultaneously at dawn so none of them can warn the others or flee. But James, there's something else you need to know." He tensed. "What?" Vivian's expression was troubled. "Nancy's stepfamily. They're on the list too. All three of them. They've been working with the conspirators for at least 6 months. That's why they sent her here. She was supposed to be a distraction. A pretty girl to occupy your attention while they positioned their real assassins." The words hit me like cold water. My stepfamily had tried to have the king killed. Had sent me here knowing I'd likely die in the process. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still hurt. Still made my chest tight with old wounds reopened. "Nancy?" The king's voice pulled me back. His hand tightened on mine. "Are you all right?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be. I've learned not to expect anything better from them." "They'll be arrested along with the others," Vivian said firmly. "They'll face justice for their crimes." "Thank you." I managed to keep my voice steady. "When will this happen?" "Dawn. Be ready. It's going to be chaotic." Vivian looked at her brother. "James, I need you to stay here. Protected. Let me handle the arrests." "Absolutely not." His voice was steel. "I'll be there for every single arrest. They need to see me. Need to know that their blind, helpless king was never as weak as they thought." "James. This isn't negotiable, Vivian. I'm ending this personally." Vivian sighed but nodded. "Then I'm doubling your guard detail. And Nancy stays with you the entire time." That was already the plan. He finally released my hand and straightened, slipping back into the regal bearing of a king preparing for battle. "Notify the loyalist guards. Have them ready to move at first light. We arrest everyone simultaneously. No exceptions." After Vivian left, the king and I stood in silence for a long moment. The weight of what was coming pressed down on both of us. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow would be violent and dangerous and potentially deadly. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "Not for myself. For you. If something goes wrong. It won't." His confidence was absolute. "We have the element of surprise. We have evidence. We have loyal guards. And we have each other." His hand found mine again. "That's more than enough." I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. So I nodded and squeezed his hand. "What happens after?" I asked. "After the arrests, after the trials, after all of this is over?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Then, I rebuild. My kingdom. My court. My ability to trust. It won't be easy. The scars from this will last years. But I'll do it. And I hope, he turned to face me fully, his gray eyes focused and intense, that you'll stay. Help me rebuild. Not as a servant, but as someone I trust. Someone important to me. My heart stuttered. Your Majesty. James, he corrected softly. When we're alone, call me James. James, I repeated, testing the name on my tongue. I'd be honored to stay. For as long as you want me. Then it's settled. He pulled me close one more time, resting his forehead against mine. Tomorrow we end this nightmare. Together. Together, I agreed. We stayed up most of that night, neither of us able to sleep with dawn approaching and danger looming. James finally dropped his blind pretense completely, at least when we were alone. It was startling to see him move with perfect confidence, to catch him watching me with focused intensity, to have him look me in the eye when we spoke. This was the real James Cofer. Not the blind king or the paranoid ruler or the grieving widower. Just a man who'd been forced to become someone he wasn't in order to survive. And now, finally, he could stop pretending. When the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Vivian returned with a full contingent of trusted guards. It's time, she announced. James stood, every inch the powerful Lycan king. He looked at me. Ready? As I'll ever be. Then let's finish this. We moved through the palace like a storm, guards fanning out to designated targets while James led the main group to Lord Ashford's quarters. I stayed close to his side, my heart pounding with each step. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. Ashford's door shattered under the guards' assault. Inside, the elderly lord was just rising from bed, his face going from confusion to terror as he recognized James. Surprise, James said coldly. His eyes were focused and furious, no longer pretending even a hint of blindness. I can see perfectly, Ashford. I've been able to see for months. Every meeting where you thought you were manipulating a helpless blind king? I saw through every lie. Your Majesty, Ashford stammered, backing away. I don't know what you've been told, but... We found your letters. Your financial records. Every piece of evidence proving you helped murder my mate and unborn child. James's voice was quiet, deadly. You held Lorelei at her naming ceremony. You swore an oath to protect her. And you killed her. Ashford's face crumpled. It wasn't personal, Your Majesty. It was just business. The kingdom needed stronger leadership, and you were too soft, too focused on peace instead of expansion. She was pregnant. James roared, his control finally snapping. She was carrying my child, and you poisoned her like she was nothing. Guards seized Ashford before he could respond, dragging him away still protesting his innocence. James stood rigid, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. James, I said softly, touching his arm. There are more arrests to make. He nodded stiffly and moved on. We repeated the scene 6 more times. Captain Brennan tried to fight and was subdued. Lady Catherine wept and begged for mercy. Each arrest was a fresh betrayal, a fresh wound reopened. And then we reached my stepfamily's quarters. Thomas answered the door with a sneer that died when he saw the guards. What's the meaning of this? Thomas Hartley, James announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit regicide, embezzlement, and fraud. This is absurd. Thomas tried to slam the door, but guards forced it open. Behind him, Georgina and Lillian appeared, their faces pale with fear. And then they saw me standing beside the king, dressed in fine clothes, clearly trusted and protected. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I wasn't so numb. Nancy? Georgina's voice was shrill. What have you done? I survived, I said quietly. Despite your best efforts to get me killed. We did no such thing. We sent you here to serve, to bring honor to our family. You sent me here hoping I'd either be executed as a spy or killed in whatever assassination attempt you were planning, I corrected. The king knows everything. We have evidence of all your crimes. Lillian started crying. Georgina drew herself up with desperate dignity. This is a mistake. We're loyal subjects of the crown. Nancy is lying, just like she's always lied. Enough. James's voice cut through her protests like a blade. You will be taken to the dungeons to await trial. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Save your lies for the judges. Guards led them away, Georgina still protesting, Thomas silent and pale, Lillian sobbing. I watched them go and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just emptiness where years of hurt had lived. James's hand found mine. You all right? I will be. It's just strange, seeing them brought low like this. Part of me thought they were untouchable. No one is untouchable. Not even kings. He squeezed my hand gently. Come on. We have one more arrest to make. The last was the hardest. Lady Catherine, his godmother, who'd helped raise him after his own mother died. She didn't fight or protest. Just looked at him with sad, resigned eyes. I'm sorry, James, she said simply. I loved your mother. But I loved power more. That was the cruelest cut of all. Not even pretending she'd had noble reasons. Just admitting to base greed and ambition. James's face was stone as he had her led away. By mid-morning, it was over. Every conspirator was in custody. The palace was secured. And James stood in his chambers, looking out the window at his kingdom, his shoulders bowed with exhaustion and grief. I approached slowly, uncertain if he wanted company or solitude. But when I touched his shoulder, he turned and pulled me into his arms, holding on like I was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. It's over, he whispered. Finally over. Yes. I held him just as tightly. You did it. You got justice for Lorelei. Justice doesn't feel like I thought it would. He pulled back just enough to look at me, and his eyes were wet with tears he'd been holding back all morning. She's still gone. Our son is still dead. Nothing I do will bring them back. No. But now you can grieve them properly. Without fear. Without having to be someone you're not. You can finally let yourself feel everything you've been holding in. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You're too wise for someone so young. I just know what it's like to hide your real feelings to survive. And I know how much it costs. We stood like that as the sun climbed higher, two survivors holding each other in the aftermath of battle. The trials would come later. The rebuilding. The long process of healing. But for now, this was enough. Nancy, James said eventually, pulling back to look at me. I need to tell you something. What is it? When this started, when I began pretending to be blind, I told myself I was doing it to catch my enemies. To get justice. But somewhere along the way, it became about something else. I didn't want to see the world that had taken everything from me. Didn't want to witness more betrayal, more pain. I was hiding from life itself. And now? Now you've shown me that sight isn't just about seeing threats. It's about witnessing kindness. Recognizing genuine care. Watching someone be brave even when they're terrified. He cupped my face in his hands. You made me want to really see again. Not just track enemies, but appreciate beauty. Hope. Connection. Tears pricked my eyes. James. I'm not saying this to pressure you into anything. I know I'm a mess. Grieving, paranoid, carrying more baggage than any one person should. But I need you to know that you've saved me in ways that have nothing to do with poisoned wine or assassination attempts. You've saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be. You saved me too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. From disappearing completely. From forgetting I was worth saving. You see me, James. Really see me. Not as worthless or invisible, but as someone who matters. You do matter. So much. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to mine. Whatever happens next, whatever we become to each other, I want you to know that. You matter to me more than I thought anyone would ever matter again. And you matter to me, I whispered back. We stayed like that, wrapped in each other, as the palace stirred to life around us. There would be trials and testimonies. Executions, probably. Restructuring the entire court to root out any remaining corruption. Years of work ahead. But we would face it together. The blind king who could finally see clearly, and the invisible girl who'd finally been seen. Two broken people who'd somehow found each other in the darkness and decided to walk back into the light side by side. It wasn't the ending either of us had imagined. But it was real. And honest. And full of possibility. And sometimes, that's the best kind of beginning there is. If you've made it this far, thank you for being part of this journey with Nancy and James. Their story resonates because we've all felt invisible at some point. We've all struggled to trust after being hurt. This channel is dedicated to bringing you deep, character-driven stories that stay with you long after the final word. Subscribe to make sure you never miss what's coming next. Drop a comment and let me know which moment hit you hardest. And remember, you're part of this community now. Welcome home. The end.